Hello. Tonight, on Humanity's Ledger, we will dive deep into the pages of one of our oldest chapters. Cave people. This name usually conjures up images of primitive humans running, breaking stones, constantly chasing danger in our minds. Right? But it turns out, it wasn't just that. Let's take a look together at their harsh, yet surprisingly calm routines, at the peaceful moments we have forgotten. Before we begin, a lot of effort goes into publishing videos every day on this channel. You can support me by subscribing, sharing your thoughts with me in the comments, and via the Join button. The reviews I receive from you all are a great motivation. I'm glad you're here. Now, dim the lights a little. Perhaps to the sound of a soft fan in the background, let's hide away together towards moments in the workings of history that are much calmer, much more peaceful. If you're ready, we're descending to its deepest layers. What appears in your mind when you close your eyes? Perhaps a soft bed, a warm blanket, and the first rays of sunlight filtering through your eyelids. Maybe the smell of coffee from the next room or the chirping of a distant bird. Now, set all that aside. Because we are going back tens of thousands of years, to humanity's first awakenings, before dawn was polluted by city lights. For a Paleolithic human, morning was very different from what we understand as waking up. Most people slept on animal skins or directly on packed earth in a shelter. The luxury of a bed was provided by a thick deer skin or perhaps gathered dry grass and leaves. These would slightly block the moisture coming from the cold ground and wrap you up. Things like pillows didn't really exist. Maybe a rounded stone or a bone happened to be where you rested your head. But comfort was very low on the priority list that day. Practicality was paramount. The main concern was protecting your body from the cold and isolating it as much as possible from disturbing external elements. You most likely slept next to a fire. But this had a vital purpose far removed from the ambience of a romantic campfire. The fire protected you from freezing cold. It also kept wandering predators and annoying insects away. Groups slept close together, in small, tight clusters. It was a shelter. Families, extended families, and everyone else who was part of the local band. There was no concept of privacy. Everyone heard everything. Even perhaps the snoring of the cousin sleeping next to you. The day usually started with the first faint light of dawn, or a little before. This wasn't to watch a fascinating sunrise. It was a wake-up call dictated by components. Perhaps you woke to the whisper of a cold wind seeping through the cave entrance, or because someone had started coughing again. Deep sleep was rare anyway. A state of half-sleep, half-alertness was part of that world. Survival always required having a package. The first thing you did after waking was to check the fire. It was the heart of the group. If it had gone out, someone had to relight it. This was always one of the most tedious tasks, beginning with the continuous action of those famous sticks being rubbed together. It was like an internet outage in modern times. A task requiring patience, skill, and lots of trial and error. If your hands were cold or the wood was damp, you could spend the whole day there hoping for a small ember to appear. It's a fact that everyone is grumpy before the fire comes back to life. Like a modern human who hasn't had their morning coffee, but with much more serious consequences. Because fire meant not just warmth, but also cooking food, hardening tools, and most importantly, keeping predators away. Once you were sure the fire was burning safely, your eyes would inevitably drift to the tools scattered around. Spears, knives, scrapers. Whether setting out to hunt or to defend yourself, it was vital that everything was in good condition. Being left with a dull tool or a blunted knife meant your ability to find food, defend yourself, or process meat was crippled. Some individuals were particularly skilled at making or maintaining these tools. These people were respected within the group, and a tool breaking was a common situation. Although they probably expected some deer haunch or a few berries in return. Children were usually the first to make noise. They started moving around, looking for something to eat or something to do. Often both. The adults would stir and begin preparing for the day. This could mean going out to fetch water, check the weather conditions, or look for signs of animal movement. With the first light of morning, the relentless pace of daily life began. No one started the day slowly, sitting at a modern breakfast table. There was no time for that. The daily goal was simple. Brutally simple. Stay warm, find food, and survive. If you woke up in one piece, your fire was still burning, and there was nothing immediately dangerous outside, you had already won the day in the Paleolithic era. That was the very definition of a good day back then. These first hours set the tone for the Paleolithic human's day. Every day was an adventure starting almost from scratch. But this adventure was carried out with a calm determination and collective solidarity. Once the day had said hello to the Paleolithic human and the fire was safely burning, the next big task that came to mind was usually tool maintenance. After the initial morning checks, your hands would instinctively reach for those cold, hard stones and bones, the familiar objects in your palms. These tools were not just accessories. Survival without them was impossible. A tool was an extension of your body. Because without a good cutting edge, you couldn't cut meat, process hides, or defend yourself. Survival depended on a sharp blade as much as a sharp wit. Therefore, a surprisingly large portion of the day was spent bent over a suitable stone, hitting other rocks against it to achieve that perfect shape. This was the Paleolithic way of saying, "Welcome to toolmaking." It was partly an artisan's skill, partly an endless process of trial and error, and entirely dependent on your ability not to smash your thumb with a rock. That, "not again," feeling when you hit your thumb with a hammer in the modern world might be an ancient output inherited from our ancestors. The preferred raw material for tools was usually flint. If you were a bit more fortunate and lived near an active volcano, you could use brighter, sharper-edged, and perhaps even slightly fancier-looking materials like obsidian. These special stones broke in a predictable way. This allowed a skilled hand to direct the fractures and create delicate cutting tools. Taking a stone and hitting it at just the right spot, at just the right angle, and seeing the perfect flake come off was like a science fiction movie scene for that period. Witnessing a miracle. The basic starter kit was quite extensive. Hand axes, scrapers, spear points, and who knows, perhaps the most popular item, a primitive hammer, which was essentially a rock firmly attached to a handle. There was no such thing as a one-size-fits-all design. Each tool had a specific purpose. Some for chopping meat and breaking bones, others for shaping wood, and some for more obscure tasks that we still don't fully understand what they were used for, but probably involved some form of scraping. Scientists still debate the exact use of some tools from that era. Maybe the people of that time also made them thinking, well, it looks like it could be useful for this. Most Paleolithic humans could make their own tools. But as in every era, some were more talented at it. If someone in the group had the ability to make perfectly balanced spear points or extremely sharp knives, they immediately gained respect and constantly faced requests from neighboring clans like, "Can you make one for me too?" These masters were not just artisans, they were individuals critical to the clan's survival. Sharpening tools was a constant task. A dull blade was not just useless, it was dangerous. It would either wound you or waste your precious time. Stones were ground, directed, and tested every day. And yes, sometimes this meant spending 2 hours to make something that broke after 2 minutes of use. But no one complained. You just started over. Because complaining was considered a waste of energy. And in that era, there was no energy to waste. There was only perseverance and repetition. Toolkits were usually passed down from father to son, from mother to daughter. If they were lost in an exchange or stolen, it caused major problems. Losing your toolkit wasn't just an inconvenience. It meant serious danger. You had nothing sharp in your hand, and the wild was always expected to produce something split or toothed. It was as if the wilderness would immediately sense your weakness. Occasionally, creativity came into play. Someone would think of something never considered before, like tying a rock to a stick with animal sinew and calling it a hammer. Others discovered the uses of bone. It was flexible, light, and perfect for delicate work. Sharpening a bone copy to make a needle or drilling small holes was the high technology of that era. Such innovations were the foundations of later technological revolutions. Even if the inventors were just trying to cut things faster or use them more efficiently, every new tool was a small step but represented a giant leap in humanity's progress. These tools also shaped the Paleolithic humans' connection with their environment. Striking a stone wasn't just about sharpening it, it was also a dialogue with nature. Knowing which stone was workable, knowing how it could be broken, was a way of mastering the resources around you. It was a silent dance, a harmony, and a struggle for adaptation. The preparation of tools, or their absence, signaled the transition to the next major task that would shape the rest of the day: hunting and foraging. With each strike of a blade, each spear point, the clan's moment of survival increased a little more. And this silent, relentless effort occupied a significant part of the Paleolithic human's life. Perhaps that's why the thoughtful silence they fell into while making their tools was one of their forms of rest. If your eyes are getting heavy now, imagine the rhythmic sounds of those ancient hands chipping away at their work. This is a reflection of these people's will to survive, and it leaves you with a profound sense of their resilience. Sometimes, holding the most primitive tools provides the greatest peace. Your tools are now sharp and ready. If the morning's first tasks are complete, then it's time for the day's main event, the hunt. In the Paleolithic world, hunting wasn't a solitary hobby done on weekends as we understand it in the modern world. It was a full-fledged team operation, essential for the group's survival, usually involving the healthiest members capable of hunting. There might also be a guy shouting not so useful but motivating things like, "Go left, there's plenty," and "that one's not a deer." Big animals were always the jackpot. Mammoths, bison, wild horses. A single large animal could feed the entire group for a week, or even longer. Such a prize was worth any risk. But these animals were also, as you might expect, very dangerous. Mammoths didn't just wait around to be speared. They were fast, heavy, and had no patience for the hairless bipeds approaching them with wooden sticks. A mammoth's rage could be much more destructive than a modern tantrum. Planning a big hunt required real coordination. The strongest and smartest members of the clan would survey the terrain, noting every tree and possible ambush point, devising grand, selectable plans. Scouts would go ahead to track animal herds and check for threats. Others prepared traps. Deep pits cleverly covered with branches, natural bottlenecks in rivers, or even steep cliffs if the group was feeling particularly ambitious that day, where animals could be driven off the edge. It's terrifying to imagine the helpless fall of those massive creatures, matched only by the howling wind at the cliff's edge, reflecting the brutal reality of survival. Then came the ambush. This was an action that, however dangerous, had to be carried out with calm determination. Shouting, spear throwing, and lots of running. The hope was to bring down a large animal, preferably before someone from the team was taken down, because the safety of the team was as important as the hunt itself. The golden rule of survival was for everyone to stay alive. A wrong move or panic from a few people could turn the whole hunt into a disaster. For smaller game, like deer, wild boar, or rabbits, the process was simpler. Spears, clubs, and clever ambushes were used. Traps and snares were also helpful, especially for lone or small group hunters. Waiting patiently in a flexible hide for a squirrel, or patiently tracking a rabbit's trail, demonstrated a different kind of hunter's calm and focus. But even with smaller animals, things could go wrong. One wrong step and you could find yourself being chased by a boar through the forest, then trying to explain to its family why you almost caught it. It is reported that this was one of the most frequently used, almost unchangeable excuses by hunters of that time. Sometimes the hunting party would return victorious, dragging meat, bones, and the bragging rights for that night back to the cave. The smell, discernible from kilometers away, was a feast and a morale booster for the clan. A successful hunt didn't just fill bellies. It also strengthened the group's solidarity and boosted its confidence. Other times, the hunters returned to the cave only with scratches and excuses. The wind changed was a popular one. So was blaming whoever sneezed during the ambush. Whose sneeze it was could be linked to the failed hunt. Even excuses back then required flexibility. Meat wasn't just a food source. It was also status. The one who made the kill usually gained more respect and less chores that night. But that didn't mean they didn't share the meat. Sharing was still very common. You needed your group, and as a result, burning bridges would lead to awkward silences around the fire. No one wanted to be left out. Especially when it came to a meal so hard-won. Hunting wasn't just about survival. It was about teamwork, risk, and real-time strategy. All while trying not to be crushed, or in the quiet of an ambush, between the whispers of the wind and your own, the hunter's heart pounded rhythmically. With both excitement and a calm focus. As the sun began to set, the hunters would return to camp with heavy steps. The joy of a successful hunt or the fatigue of failure was the result of the day's duty. The clan had worked to secure the next meal. This was the theme of that existence. Its day was a new struggle, its success a victory, its failure a lesson. And this cycle was the fundamental rhythm of the Paleolithic human. If your eyes are getting heavy now, imagine the slow steps of those ancient hunters in the forest and the tired but happy breaths of those returning successfully. This rhythmic story detaches you in a profound way. It should not be forgotten that even the greatest struggles in history can sometimes transform into the calmest dreams. Whether hunters returned empty-handed or victorious, from a Paleolithic perspective, not everyone was chasing mammoths. Some people had a much more practical, quieter job. Things that didn't fight back, run away, or need stabbing were available. Foraging for food was perhaps not as dramatic as hunting, but it was vitally important and, to be honest, often more successful. The foraging team was usually made up of women, older adults, and children too small to throw a spear. This team covered a wide area. They knew where berries, fruits, and vegetables were hidden, in growing regions, along riverbanks, in meadows where flowers bloomed. Their eyes were constantly searching. They examined a leaf, a stone, a shadow. The things to look for were incredibly varied: edible flowers, berries depending on the season, strawberries, wild plums, nuts, different types of roots, seeds, mushrooms, and sometimes everything else that didn't cause regret. Knowing what was safe to eat wasn't a simple lesson. It was vital knowledge learned through experience passed down through generations, trial and error, and, unfortunately, sometimes through a funeral. Distinguishing between poisonous and edible plants was often a matter of life and death. Perhaps once, a curious child ate the wrong berries, and the whole clan learned that lesson the hard way. This knowledge was passed to future generations through tales, songs, and the stories of the elders, so the mistakes of the past were not repeated. The foragers developed strong mental maps of their terrain. Which meadows had tubers, which trees dropped the best nuts, which valley had edible plants that weren't visible but were certainly remembered. Its path, its hill, its puddle were all landmarks in their minds. This knowledge was effectively shared. A good route, run at intervals, could turn your next foraging trip into a successful one. These mental maps were not just directions, they were a testament to a deep connection with nature. The ability to understand and learn from nature's whispers. But not everything progressed safely and slowly. Sometimes foragers also had to deal with wildlife. Competing with birds, squirrels, and even bears for a blackberry bush was a very real thing. You can understand the calm of a forager who sees a squirrel quickly running away or a bird emptying a branch full of fruits. Stepping on a wasp nest while reaching for honey was a mistake no one made willingly twice. That sharp lesson was immediately etched into memory. Foraging was also a multitasking instruction. While gathering food, people could also collect firewood, feathers, bark, or plants for medicine. Tracking the trail of a medicinal plant while gathering dry tree branches in the depths of the forest meant being the Paleolithic human's natural pharmacy and carpenter. Children would wander along, learning the tasks, and occasionally eating things they weren't supposed to. Keep an eye out. And while you were arguing whether that mushroom looked weird this time, you were trying not to lose them all. The children's endless curiosity sometimes led to discoveries, while other times it caused many heart attacks for the adults. The gathered food was usually more reliable than hunted meat. Plants didn't run away, nuts couldn't stab you. And if you timed it right, a single day's harvest could feed the whole group for a few days or at least provide options between unsuccessful hunts. While hunters sometimes returned empty-handed, the foragers always found something. They were the quiet heroes. They weren't dramatic. They didn't show off. But on the evening the hunting party returned empty-handed, it was the foragers who saved dinner. Their patience and knowledge were a visible, yet often overlooked, shield. Foraging was more than just filling bellies, it was an expression of a deep bond with nature. Feeling the wind sort the rooms, observing its workings. It was a kind of meditation. A way of living in harmony with nature's provisions. Every root the earth gave, every fruit was silent proof of life's continuity. And returning to camp as the sun began to set with bags full of food gave a sweet feeling of fatigue, a sign that another day was complete. If your eyes are getting heavy now, imagine the slow steps of those ancient foragers in the forest, their bountiful harvests from nature's generosity, and the traditional, peaceful satisfaction from each fruit or root. This rhythmic story detaches you in a profound way. Remember, even history's greatest achievements are sometimes attained through the calmest, most careful efforts. As the evening sun cast its glow, while hunters returned to camp empty-handed or with the weight of a deer on their shoulders, the foragers had also filled their baskets with fresh roots and fruits. Bellies were fed. The day's stories were told. But everyone knew they needed a safe place for the night. This is where one of the Paleolithic humans' most fundamental innovations came into play: shelters. Contrary to popular belief, not every human in its history lived in a cave. If you were lucky enough to find one, you certainly used it. A natural shelter, it offered protection from the wind and had wide walls. It was essentially a ready-made house, a natural real estate offer. But caves weren't always available, especially if other groups or wild animals had already claimed them. That's when early humans, like a determined human today, built their own houses. Construction was a full group effort. One person held long branches, another did the tying work with animal sinews or vines. Someone else stood by, acting like they knew what they were doing. Perhaps useless comments were made, like, maybe if you held it a little more here. If the structure collapsed halfway, no one was surprised. They just shrugged, started from the foundation, and tried again. This time with new strategies, like an extra stick or tying it tighter this time. This trial and error process formed the basis of Paleolithic engineering. The frame of the structure was made from sturdy branches or, for example, the ribs of larger prey animals like mammoths. These frames were secured with strong animal sinews or sturdy vines. Then they were covered with hides, tree bark, or packed earth. The result? A crooked, leaning, but standing structure that leaked slightly less than outside. These shelters would somewhat block the howling of the wind, the patter of the rain, and perhaps the sounds of wild animals from afar on a stormy night. The weather was always a big problem. Rain turned earthen floors into mud pits immediately, making the inside of the shelter uncomfortable. Wind could rip and carry away the hide coverings. If the shelters weren't supported sturdily enough, the whole structure could collapse. That's why some groups built seasonal structures. Light partitions built and taken apart in the summer, and heavier, sturdier winter shelters for the long, freezing cold. Insulation was a luxury in the Paleolithic era. If you had any, animal hides covered the walls and floor. This made the interior a bit warmer and more comfortable. Otherwise, you just layered up and complained about the cold. The fire ideally stayed in the center of the shelter. There needed to be a hole in the roof for the smoke to escape, though usually, an equal amount of cold air came in. This was slightly healthier than the smoke burning your eyes, but it was still not a perfect solution. In the depths of the night, the group huddled around the fire, feeling each other's breaths, finding a modicum of security within that small, makeshift shelter despite the freezing temperatures outside. Furniture? There wasn't much. A flat rock to sit on, a suitable spot for a nap, and perhaps a pile of furry animal skins to sleep on. Luxury was actually having a warm, draft-free corner and the roof not dripping on your head. And yet, despite the limited features, prehistoric humans managed to build houses that worked. They weren't beautiful. They were far from aesthetic. But they managed to keep you alive, dry, and occasionally upright during a storm. Their simplicity was a feature of their functionality. When night fell, within the shelter, between the warmth of the fire and the whispers of the wind outside, the Paleolithic human experienced that rare peace of leaving another day's struggles behind. These shelters were not just physical protection, they were also a mental refuge. The faint hum inside was a shield against the unknown outside, and perhaps under these peaceful roofs, humanity's first dreams were seen. Dreams of the future, dreams containing warmth and security. If your eyes are getting heavy now, imagine the quiet necessities of those ancient shelters, the gentle hum of the wind outside, and the crackle of the fire. This rhythmic story detaches you in a profound way. Remember, even history's most primitive houses can shelter the deepest peace. Between the crackle of the fire in the safe and dim environment of a Paleolithic hut or cave and the whispers of the wind outside, life and its fundamental themes continued. The birth of new life. Parenting in the Paleolithic era came without the guides, podcasts, and certainly without strollers of our modern world. When a child came into the world, the parents were instantly responsible for keeping a small, separate, and very fragile human alive in a world full of cliffs, predators, and sharp rocks. And they had to do this without losing their own spears or their sanity. Childbirth was a communal event in itself. It was painful, messy, and risky. Surviving without modern medical support was a major achievement for both mother and baby. If you made it through safely, congratulations. Now it was time for the next challenge, keeping the environment warm, the child fed, and ensuring their curiosity didn't lead them to stick their fingers in the fire, which they often did. Those bright, dancing flames held an irresistible attraction for a young mind, and the lesson was often learned the hard way. There were no diapers. Babies were wrapped in animal skins or plant fibers, and mess was just a natural part of it. Mothers learned to clean their babies, often laying them on rocks. There was no baby food, so mothers typically breastfed for a long time. Meat wasn't a very efficient or practical method for a 1-year-old baby's development. So the mother's milk was a vital source of nutrition. This long breastfeeding period created a deep physical bond between mother and child. It also helped delay a new pregnancy. Discipline was practical and direct. If a child got too close to a cliff, a timeout wasn't an option. You grabbed them from the edge and growled a short, understandable warning like, "No," before they fell. The risks were too high, and safety rules had to be taught quickly. Touching fire, chasing wolves, or picking unknown berries were considered vital teaching moments, ideally before something exploded, burned, or caused hallucinations. There was no, "you're risking your child's life," celebration. Risk was inside you every day, and teaching them survival instructions was a great act of love. But Paleolithic parenting wasn't always full of dangers. Children played constantly. They could be within boundaries with sticks, stones, bones, anything that looked interesting even from a distance. That was the form of play. It was a kind of survival simulation. A child practicing throwing rocks could one day be the tribe's best hunter. A child quietly watching the elders had the potential to become a shaman or healer. No one asked them what they wanted to be when they grew up. You just survived and, depending on your general components, turned into something. Maybe the best archer, maybe the fastest forager, maybe the best storyteller. Older children helped with chores. They took on tasks like gathering firewood, fetching water, scaring birds away from drying meat. By the time they were 10, they were considered semi-functional members of society. They could still be annoying, but they were now useful. There was no formal education system. Children learned through observation, repetition, and trial and error in the mud. They had no toys, they had nature, and nature didn't come with safety labels. Getting stuck in a swamp or stopping a falling tree branch wasn't just a game, it was also a vital lesson. The clan was, in a sense, an extended family. Children were raised not only by their biological parents but by the entire clan. The elders passed on their wisdom. Experienced hunters taught the young how to track. Foragers whispered which plant was edible. Everyone took responsibility for the survival and cohesion of the group. This communal life created a safety net. It was the future of the individual and increased the strength of the weak. In the tranquility of the night, the soft breaths of children echoing inside the cave were a silent whisper of hope for continuity. The peace on the tired faces of the parents was an indescribable serenity brought by knowing their offspring were sleeping safely beside them. If your eyes are getting heavy now, imagine the quiet confidence of those ancient families intertwined, the joyful sounds of children's liberating games, and the tightly knit bonds of a clan. This rhythmic story detaches you in a profound way. Remember, even history's most fundamental bonds can shelter the deepest peace. After a long day filled with hunting, foraging, shelter repair, and general efforts to survive, early humans finally achieved what we might call leisure time. Of course, Paleolithic social life was far from modern activities like wine tasting and clubbing. But it was still something. It was a special time that nourished the soul, strengthened bonds, and shed the fatigue of the day. The heart of social activity was always the fire. The sun set quickly, and without electric lights or lanterns, darkness came rapidly and completely. That's when the group gathered around the fire's glow for the night's final act. This was equal parts relaxation and survival maintenance. People didn't just gather for a party. Because the fire was the only source of heat and light. So they had to come together. Yet it served as the tribe's gathering point. Everyone came to eat their food cycles, to shed the stress of the day. Evening conversations weren't small talk about the weather. These were storytelling sessions. People shared the day's events, recounted exaggerated hunts, probably everyone's hunt was exaggerated by at least 30%, and told stories about spirits, ancestors, or that one guy who once tried to hug a porcupine. Storytelling wasn't just entertainment. This was how knowledge was transferred. What to eat, what to avoid, good hunting grounds and regions. All this vital information was conveyed in stories full of dramatic gestures and arm-waving. This was the Paleolithic Netflix. But there was no problem with buffering back then. The stories came to life in minds, experiences passed from generation to generation. Sometimes singing and rhythmic sounds echoed around the campfire. Rhythmic, simple chants or call-and-response sounds filled the night's silence. A piece of bone might serve as a flute. A hollow log formed a drum. The music wasn't polished. There were no complex melodies, but it didn't need to be. Its purpose was to lift spirits, keep the cold a little further away, and bring the community together. And afterwards, since no one told them to stop, 3 children would start spinning in their own circles. This could be considered the beginning of Paleolithic dance. Boasting was also an important part of social life. If someone had a successful hunt, they would summarize it. If they made a sharp tool, they would show it off randomly, pretending not to care. Social status wasn't about wealth. It was about skills. Who could hunt? Who could lead? Who could keep the fire alive without burning their own eyebrows? These were the ways to gain respect and position within a clan. The best storyteller or the person who knew the most medicinal herbs also carved out a special place for themselves. We're flirting. Yes, it happened. There weren't many options. Therefore, romantic gestures were often subtle and practical. Sharing food was a big deal. If someone gave you the choicest piece of meat or a handful of berries, something they technically didn't have to do, it was definitely a sign of interest. Helping someone scrape a hide or carry water was a green flag. Early romance was based on effort, not eloquence. Appearance was important, but only to a degree. You weren't judged by your outfit. Everyone wore a succession of fur and grime. What mattered was your survival skill. A good hunter or a skilled forager had a better chance at a mate. Couple bonds were often long-lasting but not always permanent. People stayed together for cooperation, to raise children, to share food, to survive harsh winters. If things didn't work out, a quiet separation occurred. There was no paperwork. Just fewer shared tasks and more awkward silence during group meals. No one threw stones. At least, not in the moment. The first step of flirting was proximity. Maybe you lived in a small community of 20 to 40 people. This meant your dating pool consisted of everyone who wasn't already taken or wasn't your relative. It wasn't ideal, but there was no prehistoric version of Tinder. Unless you count making eye contact while chewing on a piece of squirrel. Sexual matters were probably more flexible than modern norms allow. Some anthropologists suggest early humans were less possessive than the agricultural societies that followed. Group dynamics, survival, and mobility shaped relationship norms more than personal jealousy. And of course, there were no love songs. Just quiet companionship, a shared pile of soft hides, and the mutual understanding that neither of you wanted to be alone. Romantic partnerships could work instantly. Paleolithic couples formed bonds, raised children, and weathered storms. And not a single one of them went through their entire lives without ever arguing about who forgot to wash the dishes. In the depths of the night, around the fire, conversations would slow, laughter would multiply, and then give way to a deeper, more thoughtful silence. People would gaze into the fire, lost in their thoughts. They would replay the day's events in their minds and perhaps nurture quiet hopes for the future. The faint glow of the fire illuminated their faces, making shadows dance. A scene both ancient and therapeutic, preserved for us, future scientists, thousands of years later. The clan's breathing merged with the crackle of the fire, preparing them for a safe slumber. If your gaze is getting heavy now, imagine the rhythm of that ancient campfire warmth, the stories, the whispers, and the peace of a closely knit community. This rhythmic story detaches you in a profound way. Remember, even history's most primitive conversations can shelter the deepest peace. After a long day of hunting, gathering, building shelters, and generally not dying, early humans still found time for art, that uniquely human trait. Yes, you heard right. Maybe they didn't have galleries, museums, or paintings that looked too abstract, but they had walls. Large, cold cave walls, and these walls practically begged for decoration. The human drive for self-expression, even in the most practical of times, was beginning to sprout then. The oldest known cave paintings are over 30,000 years old, and some may be even older. Famous examples found in places like Lascaux and Chauvet in modern France show just how skilled these ancient artists were. These weren't random scribbles. Animals like bison, deer, horses, and mammoths were often drawn with astonishing accuracy and a sense of movement. It's as if those animals continue to gallop across the cave walls. Some drawings had lines showing the animals' movements. Others featured dots, handprints, or symbols we still haven't fully deciphered. It's as if the walls were gushing with an ancient language. A language we still don't fully understand. So what tools did these first artists use? Nothing fancy. They used charcoal, ochre, red and yellow pigments obtained from the earth, and natural pigments like manganese. These crushed minerals were mixed with water, animal fat, or their own saliva to create a kind of paint. They used their fingers, sticks, or chewed plant ends as brushes. They even developed a way to blow pigment through hollow bones onto their hands. Yes, prehistoric humans invented the airbrush long before it appeared on motorcycles. This was an incredible skill they created using the features nature offered. So why did they paint? No one knows for sure. Maybe it was storytelling. A way to record the clan's shared experiences, great hunts, or important events. Perhaps it reflected spiritual beliefs. A procedure for invoking animal spirits, wishing for abundance, or communicating with natural mysteries. Or maybe someone just had a comprehensive talent and no one told them to stop. The impulse to make art was simply an instinct, a form of expression. Some anthropologists link this behavior to rituals. A way to summon success or to map out which animals to chase and which to avoid. In the deep caves, by the light of firebrands, these images may have been visualized fragments of a successful hunt in the minds of the hunters. The artists probably worked in the deepest, darkest, and most remote parts of the caves, illuminated only by the flickering light of a firebrand. These were places where no one lived, used only for special ceremonies or artistic creation. This suggests activities meant solely for making art. There was no commercial gain. No Instagram accounts. It was just human expression in its rawest form. Children were probably involved too. Some caves have tiny handprints. This shows that even the little ones were learning to leave their mark. Perhaps these were the first hobby lessons passed down to new generations. And while we'll never know who drew the first bison, someone was likely standing behind them, grunting in approval or offering useless criticism like, "Doesn't that bison's leg look a bit short?" It's noteworthy that this art endured long after the huts rotted away and the fire pits scattered. While most traces of Paleolithic life were erased over time, those painted animals are still galloping on the cave walls. This is unshakable proof that even 30,000 years ago, humans needed more than just food and shelter. They didn't just want to survive, they also wanted to create, to make meaning, and to leave something behind. Maybe they just really loved them. Who knows? This silent act of creation sends us whispers even thousands of years later. In the cold, dark depths of the caves, we see the power of human curiosity and the pursuit of beauty. These images have defied time, serving as a kind of primitive time capsule. And these productions show us that Paleolithic humans were not just practical beings, they also possessed a deep inner world, imagination, and a desire for creativity. While hunting and gathering were physically demanding, and the wilderness was merciless, falling ill or getting injured in the Paleolithic era was like rolling the dice with the universe. Except the dice were made of bone and had the worst faces. There were no modern hospitals, antibiotics, and certainly no emergency rooms. If you broke a limb, cut yourself, developed a mysterious rash, or writhed with an unbearable toothache, the best-case scenario was that it would take care of itself. The worst case? Well, then you just waited, hoping it would look better, while everyone else waited around the fire in a strangely quiet manner. Medical care was, of course, very basic. Extremely basic. Early humans probably had some knowledge of plants that reduced pain or inflammation. Maybe one day, a wounded hunter noticed his pain eased thanks to a warmed root. Chewed bark, certain roots, or crushed plants may have been used as primitive medicine. For example, willow bark contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in modern aspirin. I mean, It's entirely possible that a Paleolithic human was the first to discover a natural painkiller by chewing on a tree. Who knows, maybe it was because of a toothache. Treatment for wounds usually involved cleaning them with water or known antiseptic plants, then wrapping them with animal skin or moss, and constantly monitoring them. This was a world without sterile bandages. The real killer wasn't the wound itself, but infection. If it turned red, you developed a fever, and it started to smell, that was the smell of bad news. In those times, without the power of modern medicine, a small cut could lead to loss. It was a tense wait, hoping your body would fight its own battle. Broken bones sometimes healed, sometimes they didn't. Archaeological evidence from prehistoric remains shows healed fractures. Toothaches were another major problem. Teeth were worn down from constantly chewing tough meat and grit. Sometimes cavities and jaw abscesses formed. The solution? Usually, extracting the tooth with a stone. And yes, there was no such thing as anesthesia. This is reported to have been one of the most feared and painful moments in the Paleolithic period. Shamans or medicine people may have served as early doctors. These individuals were part medicinal plant expert, part spiritual guide, and part the person you didn't really want touching you. They used rituals, chants, and substances that could now be considered mildly hallucinogenic. Was it science? No. Did it work? Sometimes. The truth is, medical care was usually a combination of trial and error, survival instincts, and a bit of luck. You rested, you received care, and sometimes you pulled through. And if you didn't, your spot by the fire was passed on to someone else. Life had to go on. Humans were, at times, extremely resilient. Despite constant exposure and hardships, their immune systems were strong. Wounds healed, bones knit together, bodies regenerated themselves. Nature was both their challenger and their teacher. The relief of finding a spring to quench your thirst or a shelter from the rain on a cold day was not just a physical need but also a spiritual solace. In the silence of the night, in a camp where a clan member was ill, the group's low murmurs or the healer's chants could be heard. Perhaps a new log was thrown on the fire, believing in the healing power of the smoke. These moments showed the clan's unity, mutual support, and the will to support each other even in the most difficult times. When a restless breath gave way to a calmer one, it was a small victory. A silent testament that life went on. If your eyes are getting heavy now, imagine the gentle hands of those ancient healers, the tranquility of a healing broken bone, and the peace of a group coming together. This rhythmic story detaches you in a profound way. Do not forget, even history's greatest struggles can sometimes be a gateway to the calmest healing and the deepest peace. In the Paleolithic world, when night fell, there were no cars, trains, roads, and certainly no hopping in a vehicle. If you wanted to go somewhere, you walked. That was it. Travel was not a comfort. It was a physical and mental commitment. Whether moving camp, following prey, or perhaps just escaping the slightly uncomfortable smell of the old camp, it always meant using your own 2 feet. Mobility was an indispensable part of Paleolithic life. Paleolithic groups were typically nomadic. They moved camp regularly depending on the seasons, food availability, and more practical reasons like simply wanting to escape the old camp smell. Campsites didn't come with leases. They had no fixed address. After local resources were used up, or after mammoths migrated to greener pastures, the people would follow them. This was a way of living in harmony with nature's rhythms. Surrendering to the flow, constantly adapting to the world. Journeys could be short. A day's walk to a known hunting ground or a short round trip to a familiar grove of fruit trees. But there were also much longer journeys. Trips lasting for days, weeks, even months, covering dozens, perhaps hundreds of miles, and they had to carry everything. Tools, hides, fire-starting materials, any food they had, and of course, the children. All of this had to be gathered and carried on their backs. There was no such thing as a suitcase. Just bags made of hide or baskets woven from reeds. With each load, you felt the weight of survival on your back. And don't forget the elements. Travel meant exposure to the elements. Group movement had to be organized. Scout hunters would likely go ahead to check for threats or new resources. Everyone else would move in a steady, single file. If someone was injured, the whole group slowed down. If the weather worsened, shelter had to be found quickly. Speed was important, but so was staying together. The survival of the prehistoric group depended on the survival of its parts. This was clear evidence of the group's solidarity and resilience. Despite all this, people covered serious distances. Fossils and artifacts show Paleolithic humans migrated across continents. No GPS, no water bottles, no Spotify. Just survival, aching feet, and the unshakable human desire to see what was beyond the next hill. It was the spirit of an explorer. The courage of an adventurer. But it was all fueled by the imperative to survive. With the fragments of night, the tired group would arrive at a new camp or stop at a shelter they found along the way. The fatigue of a long day was felt in their muscles. A fire was lit, the crackle of wood accompanying their fatigue. Even with their feet aching, there was that strange feeling of peace brought by being in a new place, hearing new sounds and smells. When they closed their eyes, their minds replayed the distances they had covered that day, the obstacles they had overcome, and the landscapes they had seen. And perhaps in that tranquility, they understood that the journey wasn't just about reaching a destination, the journey itself was a way of life. Now we are coming to the end of our long journey. Starting from the first lights in the cave, we lit our fire. We chipped stones and sharpened our tools. We hunted the wild words with silent steps. We nourished ourselves from the generosity of the earth. We built simple but protective nests. We raised our families and told stories gathered around the campfire. We laughed. We supported each other. We drew our dreams and beliefs on the cave walls. We waited for healing in the hands of primitive healers, and with an endless curiosity, we walked, and walked, and walked to set out for new lands. While the Paleolithic human's life seems from the outside to be a harsh struggle, it actually contained a deep harmony and simplicity within. Their days flowed not with grand plans or complex technological innovations, but with the rhythm of nature. Finding food, seeking shelter, reproducing. These fundamental needs simplified their lives and clarified their focus. Each day was a puzzle presented by nature, and its evening ended with the sweet fatigue of having solved that puzzle, or at least of having survived the attempt. They lacked many things we consider luxuries. But perhaps these deficiencies forced a focus on what was truly important. Warmth, security, the unity of the clan, the power of a story, a burst of laughter, and that unique silence under the stars. In their world, the concept of leisure might have consisted simply of watching the dance of the flames across the fire, getting lost in one's own thoughts, or listening to the breathing of the friend beside them. It was a form of mindfulness. A slowing ritual that nourished the soul. Today, in the complexity of the modern world, the simplicity and tranquility of our Paleolithic ancestors' options may whisper an important lesson to us. Perhaps what we seek is not the latest technological innovation or the fastest pace, but that calmness that remains in our minds after our most basic needs are met. While struggling to survive every day, Paleolithic humans found ways to express themselves, socialize, and make sense of their place in the universe. That handprint on the cave wall sends an ancient greeting from our very own hands. We were here, we lived, we felt too. Throughout this journey, we almost heard their footsteps. We felt the warmth of their fire, the record of its smoke. We sensed the difficulty of their life struggles. But we also saw their simple joys, their deep bonds, and their unique harmony with nature. Their stories, even though they lived thousands of years ago, carry the fundamental essence of humanity: curiosity, the desire to explore, the protection of loved ones, and the ability to find a glimmer of hope against all odds. Now, let these ancient whispers envelop you. All the hustle and noise of the day recedes into the distance. Just as a Paleolithic clan falls silent around the fire as the sun sets, allow your mind to grow calm. Feel the softness beneath your feet. Hear the gentle hum of the wind from afar. Let the warmth of the fire, the rhythm of the stories, seep into you. Shed all the anxieties of the day through this deep and calm narrative of the past. Let those ancient sleep rhythms from thousands of years ago rest your body and mind. Let each word carry you to a deeper peace. Until your eyelids close, your breath evens out, and your mind drifts towards that serene, star-filled sky of the Paleolithic era. Remember history, not just to learn, but also because sometimes the deepest, most restful sleep is found there, for all of us. Sweet dreams.